Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos. Today we're going to take a look at the raid loot in 11.2, including trinkets, very rares, all that kind of stuff. We'll also take a look at the dungeon loot from the new dungeon, and we will take a look at the names of the tier sets as well. We've already looked in a previous video at the effects on the set bonuses and the appearances of them, but we haven't looked at the names yet, and there are some bangers in there, so that'll be how we close out this video. And then over the next couple of days, I will release some videos where we go over the dungeon journal for each of the raid bosses as well, so should be a pretty exciting time. This is one of my favorite parts of the new patch, is looking at the dungeon journal. So without further ado, let's take a look at the loot from the first boss, the Plexus Sentinel. So we've got some weapons, no special effects here, although there is a factory issue Plex hammer that has the flavor text, "Please do not modify these hammers in any way, lest they become irreversibly unstable." Then there's an overclocked one. So there's a factory issue one that's a strength one-hander, and then an overclocked one that's an int one-hander. And I guess it's now giving you brain power somehow because it's been overclocked. Love that. Then we've got some more items, some just generic ones, and we get to our first trinkets here, so no special effects on any of the items, usually expected off of the first boss. We do have the Logic Gate Alpha, which is a crit, a very heavy crit, and a little bit of Mastery Ring off of the first boss. I suspect this thing is going to be extremely in high demand for a few specs. The crit scalers out there, your Brewmasters are probably going to want this, because there's also very little crit verse gear for Brewmasters in this tier, but this is a nice, at least heavy crit one. Hunters, at both MM and BM actually, probably pretty happy with this thing. So yeah, very polarized stat budget ring here. Then we have the Eradicating Arcanocore, which is a strength trinket that says, and actually I don't know if this is also, one thing that's annoying is it doesn't display well if you check. So I should check to see if it's an int one as well. Okay, it is not also an agi one, and it is not a int one. Okay, so yeah, strength trinket. Your attacks have a high chance to charge the Arcanocore. At 10 charges, deploy a sentinel to Arcanoblast your target for a bunch of arcane damage split between nearby enemies. Recover 2 charges if only one enemy is struck, but the damage is increased by 30% per additional enemy up to 150%. So the math on this, you get back 20% of the cooldown if you're only hitting one target, but you deal like 30% more damage if you're hitting 2 targets, 60% on 3, all the way up to 150% if you're hitting 5 additional enemies. So these sorts of damage procs tend to still not scale particularly well into AoE. You usually still would rather have stats. This one has a little bit of an interesting, like it's kind of got a little bit of a buyback. On pure single target, you get the charges recovered, but it also still does scale up its damage, not fully in AoE, right? It's only by 30% per extra target. My guess is this one's going to be a pretty mid one, but maybe it'll be fine for specs that like damage procs, which not an awful lot of strength specs that do. Okay, second boss here, Lumithar. Right away, we've got our tier coming off of the second boss here, which I guess is the sort of the standard in these 8 boss raids, is they've been moving it so that the second to last boss doesn't have tier, and the 5 after the first boss all do, and it looks like they're continuing that here. So of course we have all the tier. We have an Agi Mastery Verse Dagger, a Crit Mastery Bow. Ooh, a Crit Mastery Bow off the second boss. That's really good. Those are really good stats. I mean, there was a bow off the second boss this tier, but yeah, Crit Mastery is going to be very nice for the Hunters. We have a Haste Crit Shield, perfect stats for our tanks out there. Then we have some shoulders, leather shoulders, plate wrists, mail belt, and cloth feet. In addition, we have the Astral Antenna, which works for all of the primary stats. Oh, so I guess this will show me if it works for the other primary stats. I think it's if the proc says strength. I need to check the other specs to see if it still shows up on their loot table, because that's the one that it won't tell me if that changes between specs. So this one says the antenna has a chance to detect and draw ambient arcane energy towards you, giving you crit for 10 seconds, and multiple applications may overlap. So basically a strength crit stat stick. Remains to be seen how they tune this thing, but not a strength crit, but any stat and then crit stat stick. My guess is this one's going to be pretty solid unless they make the numbers on this bad, which I don't know what the proc rate is, and those are the sorts of things that can easily change between now and release, but this seems like a very generically powerful second boss trinket that This tier, back in Liberation of Undermine, there weren't really any generically powerful trinkets off the first few bosses. The closest was probably Reverb Radio, but this seems even more generically applicable than that one. Crit procs also tend to be a little bit better than haste procs. Haste is one of those stats that you kind of want baseline, and you don't want to be procking it as much because it helps you proc more stuff. But this one, especially the fact that the multiple applications may overlap, that's probably actually really going to be quite nice for smoothing out this thing's value. And then we have Lumithar's Living Silk, a haste trinket that lets you weave an arcane cocoon around yourself and 4 nearby allies for 10 seconds, reducing their damage taken by 75% until 4.7 million damage has been prevented. If a cocoon expires, it bursts to heal an injured ally for 50% of its remaining power. This is a 90-second cooldown, and this is a lot. I mean, giving 5 people a 5 million health absorb is a lot of power. We're looking at base mythic eye level on these things, so obviously that particular number is going to change a lot, right? Like if we change this thing down to the Raid Finder version, it's 3 million. So trinket effects tend to be the things that scale the most with eye level over the tiers. So this is something that is going to be a very high powered shield. It is still a non-primary stat granting, and in fact, the secondary that's on it is haste, which a lot of healers do not particularly want haste as their trinket stat. So those are downsides of it, and then it's also a 90-second CD. A lot of healers don't like having on uses that just provide healing, but this one seems quite pushed to me in the power of the effect. Also, a 75% damage reduction absorb is probably that's a pretty nice place to land with this, because this is going to have some solid life-saving value, and it's also still going to let people take some damage under that absorb shield, right? They're still taking 25% damage, which means you can still effectively heal them depending on how the damage is incoming. So my suspicion here as well is that this is going to be a relatively strong healer trinket here off of this boss, especially for M+. And M+, you just press this and it shields your whole group. I mean, consider something like Power Word Barrier in M+. If everybody's got 12 million health, you know, Barrier giving everybody a 20% DR, for instance, is, what, 2.4 million damage on everybody that you're absorbing if they were taking a full health bar's worth of damage. Obviously, if they're taking multiple health bars worth of damage, it's more. If they're taking less, it's less. But just napkin mathing it, this is a huge amount of power, right? Like this is like 2 full health bars worth of a barrier on your M+ group if you just press this button. That seems kind of nuts. It does say weave an arcane cocoon, so if this has got a long cast time or something like that, that might kind of suck, but it doesn't say anything about that. So my suspicion is this is going to be quite a nice healer trinket here. Up next, we have Soulbinder Nazindri. This one has a first part of our Shards of the Void here. The Shards of the Void is a very interesting set bonus that involves the Diamantine Void Core, and then one other item of your choice. I believe the others are all weapons that different people can use. So a lot of different people will be able to assemble this 2-set. We'll take a look more when we get to the Diamantine Void Core, but for right now, just remember that the third boss here has a Int Haste Mastery Staff that does have a proc on it that causes, it can slice enemies for damage or orbit allies to absorb damage, and it's a large absorb there, 1.1 million, so pretty strong for the healers as well as the damage dealers on this. And then the 2-set, if you do have the Void Core, you get triple value on your shards, so potentially quite good, although this might be one of those things. Let's just take a quick look at the staves in the raid, because this might be one of those that has less overall. Is there another staff? I guess we can compare it to any two-hander. I guess, yeah, here we can see these two-handers have about 2,500 secondary, and this one also has about 2,500 secondary. So it looks like you're not even paying secondary stats to get these effects on this Void Glass Spire, which is quite powerful if true. Are you still getting the same amount of intellect on this thing? Is there another int two-hander here? It looks like there's just not another int two-hander, except for, so yeah, I can't easily compare. I guess I could look at, we could look at this on heroic. So on hero, it's got 28,000 intellect, and then we could take a look at an intellect staff, and this one this is adventurer. Okay, this one's hero, and it also has 28,161 intellect. So yeah, it really looks like you're not paying any secondary stats to get all this cool stuff on your Void Glass Spire here. This just seems like an extremely good weapon off of the third boss here. It's not even very rare, but it does have this set bonus interaction. Yeah, extremely powerful, and it's haste mastery as well. If you had to tell me, hey, there's an intellect weapon, what are the best stats to put on it? Heavy haste, light mastery is probably the best. That's probably the best thing you could say there. We also have some haste mastery fist weapon, agi fist weapon. Haste mastery, not quite as good on the fist weapons usually. We've got a verse haste necklace. We've got cloth chest piece, leather wrists, plate belt, mail boots. And then we have Nazindri's Mystical Lash, a intellect trinket that says your damaging spells have a high chance to lash your target with arcane power, dealing arcane damage split between your target and enemies caught in its path. Damage is increased by 30% per additional enemy, up to 150%, so that's new scaling that it looks like they are into this tier. At least this is our second time seeing that formula for damage being increased by enemy. I like this as well, that they're actually spelling out the percent instead of just saying damage increased per extra target up to 5 targets. Like this one is saying increased by this much per enemy up to this much percentage, and the damage is further increased by your mastery. So if you're a mastery enjoyer, your mastery is going to scale this proc, which is interesting because procs typically scale off of every stat except for mastery, right? Haste means you proc it more often. Crit, the proc can crit. Verse, the proc does baseline more damage, and this one now also just will increase its damage based off of your mastery. So generic damage proc trinket, again, does scale up slightly in AoE, but typically these sorts of things are worse than just stat procs for high-end AoE uses. Soulbinder's Embrace is the other option here. We have a Strength Agi trinket that has a 1-minute CD on use to unleash a shockwave, dealing a small amount of arcane damage to all nearby enemies, and reducing your damage taken by 50% for 20 seconds, or until 4.5 million damage has been prevented. This is a fairly small shield to put on this effect here. This is the kind of thing that makes me think this is probably not going to be too powerful of a trinket unless this is just pre-tuning. Of course, anytime I'm talking about the numbers on anything, you've got to bear in mind there's a chance that they just haven't changed the number to whatever they want it to be final yet. But the reason that I suspect this might not be true for this one is often they make tank trinkets quite weak off of the early bosses and then a lot stronger off the last bosses. Compare this to our Liberation of Undermine Gallywix tank trinket, for instance, right? The Chrome-Bustable Bomb Suit, also on a 1-minute cooldown. This one, even though it's, I guess this one's also, this is showing it scaled up to 670 or 671 here, and then I think the version that we were looking at was also maybe 671 from Manaforge Omega. Gosh, where were we? We were here. No, we were here. Never mind. This is 707. So this one prevents only 4.5 million damage every minute, whereas the Chrome-Bustable Bomb Suit, even 30 eye levels down, was preventing twice that much damage, right? So this one is definitely, as printed here, not a strong trinket. That might be tuning, that might be something they change later, but also there's a strong precedent for them just making throwaway trinkets that nobody will ever use from the first few bosses for tanks. Okay, up next we have Forge, and I guess one thing to note about that as well is this is a primary stat trinket, whereas the bomb suit is a secondary stat trinket. So maybe you could argue that this one has more power in the stats and less in the effect. But either way, I suspect with the number as printed here, you wouldn't be too thrilled about this thing. Okay, Forge Weaver Araz. We have again Tyr. This one's Tyr Helmet. We have the Marvel of Technomancy and Agi Staff. This one is Verse Haste. A two-handed sword as well, a Mastery Haste two-handed sword. An offhand here, Haste Crit. Then a mail chest off piece, plate gloves, cloth belt, which is a journal holster. So that's a cool idea for a belt. And then laboratory test slippers. Then we have a ring. This one is a Mastery Haste ring. Very heavy mastery, very light haste. Usually it's the other way around that people would prefer, but I suspect this is still going to be a pretty good ring for a lot of people. And then we have a trinket from this boss as well, Araz's Ritual Forge, a crit trinket that has a 2-minute cooldown that lets you recklessly feed a portion of your essence to the forge, granting you 39,150 strength decaying over 30 seconds, and you also pay the cost of 15% of your maximum health. Now, this is one where we're very quickly just going to check to see if it's also on the rogue loot table, so it also does agi, and it's also on the mage loot table, so it also does intellect. So whatever your primary stat is, this gives you a bunch of it every 2 minutes, decaying over 30 seconds, and this is a crit stat stick as well. My guess is this is gonna be quite good for specs that load a bunch of their damage into 2-minute cooldowns, especially those that do it in the first, say, 10 seconds of their cooldown, because it decays over those 30 seconds, right? So something like maybe an Arcane Mage and Arcane Surge, although they're not actually a 2-minute spec, so it'd be a little bit awkward for them. But they're making a 2-minute trinket work this season, so maybe they could figure it out. Maybe something like a Dev Evoker, although their Dragon Rage actually lasts quite a while, so the decaying part here might be a downside there. Maybe something like an Assassination Rogue, a Frost Death Knight, those kind of things, people that would enjoy the crit as well. I could see being specs that would enjoy this trinket quite a bit. That is a lot of strength. Up next is the Soul Hunters. This is the optional Demon Hunter Trio boss. Now, this one does have tier on it, even though it's supposedly optional. We don't know exactly what that exactly means just yet, the optional thing. Also, of course, as a Warglaive, Demon Hunter Trio, it would be a big miss if it didn't. A Mastery Crit Warglaive. We have a Mastery Verse Shield, a Haste Mastery Necklace. Ding, ding, ding. There's our necklace that everybody wants this tier. The Abyss asked Adaris for only one thing, more. And I believe Adaris is this is the one that people are speculating is going to be the new spec one. Yeah, brimming with barely contained abyssal power is what Adaris is. So there we've got some flavor text referring to Adaris getting more power or the Abyss asking of Adaris for more. Interesting. We've got a leather chest piece, plate wrists, cloth gloves, mail belt. Then we have the Brand of Ceaseless Ire, a crit trinket that says taking damage infuriates you, causing you to absorb 87,000 damage and deal 166,000 damage per infuriation, split between nearby enemies, increased by 30% per additional enemy, up to 150%. You may be further infuriated every 15 seconds, stacking up to 15 times, but calm quickly upon leaving combat. Okay, so basically the way that this is going to work, right, is that it's sort of like an Eye of Kazan type thing, except instead of proccing randomly, it's on an ICD. So every time you take damage, if you haven't been infuriated in the last 15 seconds, you become infuriated, gaining 1 stack up to 15. Now, I'm not sure if the absorb also scales with the infuriation or just the damage you do. It's ambiguous as written here. And in these videos, we never test, we just read. But either way, you'd be at least dealing more damage per infuriation. This could proc every 15 seconds, and at 15 infuriation, the base damage on this thing would be over 2 million shadow damage, which could be reasonably compelling. You know, that proccing 4 times a minute, that's 8 million damage a minute. That's a reasonable amount for a tank trinket to be doing, not to mention the absorbs, especially if those absorbs do scale with infuriation. But it does need to stack up, right? Stacks up every 15 seconds up to 15 times. So we're talking about, again, spending 4 minutes to charge this thing all the way up. Could be a decent M+ defensive thing, though, or for longer fights if you want some defense at the end of a fight. My suspicion is you probably won't be too thrilled. It's a crit trinket as well, so maybe this is a nice Brewmaster one, but most other tank specs aren't super into crit trinkets, or even if you are into crit, you really would prefer a secondary stat, or a primary stat instead of a secondary stat on your trinket. Then we have the Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt. This is an agility trinket that says your attacks have a high chance to unleash a cosmic onslaught, dealing cosmic damage to your target, increased by 2% for every 1% health the target is missing, and nearby enemies take 50% of the damage dealt, split between them. So a different formula here. This thing is dealing full damage at 2 targets, and then any extra target doesn't add more damage beyond that. It just splits between an extra target there. And this one has some nice execute value as well. If there's a fight like Muggsy or One Armed Bandit, where the fight happens and the damage check is from 40 to 0 or from 30 to 0, this thing is going to have a lot more damage because that passive proc is doing more damage towards the end of the fight. So potentially a very strong damage proc stat stick. Historically, this is the kind of thing that you look at and you think Havoc Demon Hunter is being one of the specs that's going to use this the best, and that makes perfect sense given that this boss drops from the Demon Hunter trio. So that would be a flavor win there. Okay, then we have some bonus loot in addition to a pattern. These patterns, they just move them to new bosses from every new tier. We've already seen this item, of course. But we do have a boot set here. So there are bonus loot, not very rare. These rewards have a chance to drop in addition to normal loot. So this is just bonus personal loot is our best guess for how these are going to function. And all of them just buff your legendary cloak by 50% in terms of the proc rate on them. They're also, 3 of the 4 of them are haste. 2 of the 4 of them are haste heavy, the mail and plate ones. And then we have a verse heavy leather one and a mastery heavy cloth one. But yeah, all of them do the same thing. And since you're not paying any price for this, you're getting the same amount of secondaries and stamina and primary stat as other boots. These things are likely to be best in slot for everybody, is getting yourself some Interloper's boots from the Soul Hunter's boss. Yeah, very powerful effect here. Definitely something that's going to make you want to go out of your way to kill this boss, even if it is out of your way. All right, up next, it's Fractilius. Fractilius drops tier chest pieces. We also have the Void Glass Chris. This is another item that is part of the Shards of the Void set. So this one has the same proc thing, the Void Glass Shards, and the same 2 set on Shards of the Void, which is triple effectiveness if you have a Diamantine Void Core in addition to this thing being equipped. Note as well that this is an Intellect dagger, so Intellect users have the choice of the staff or the dagger here. Then we also have the Lacerated Current Caster and a Haste Crit Crossbow, although I imagine that most hunters are going to be pretty happy with just the Lumathar bow. A Mastery Haste Offhand, Mail Helmet, Cloth Wrists, Plate Legs, Leather Feet, and then here's the Diamantine Void Core. It drops off of Fractilius. It's a Mastery Trinket that says your spells have a chance to empower the Void Core, granting you Intellect for 15 seconds. This chance is increased by 25% while below 50% mana. Multiple applications may overlap. So this entire set bonus and all of the weapons and the trinket are intellect things. So this is an intellect user's thing. So I guess that's part of the reason why that staff is going to be good, but the sword or the dagger, I guess, are also options. So as long as you can get one of those and it's wearable by your class and you can combine it with the Void Core, you're probably going to be pretty happy. The Void Core is a non-primary stat. Like it's only got mastery on it, but the proc is going to give you good uptime on intellect. And if you're below 50% mana, you will get slightly more intellect. It's only 25% more, but this does make this thing slightly better for healers and also, interestingly, for arcane mages. Arcane mages do sometimes get below 50% mana, although most of their damage is done while they're pretty high on mana. But if you could proc one of these right before you evocate back up, that could be kind of fun. Then we have the Unyielding Nether Prism. This one says it's got no primary or secondary stats on it. It says your harmful abilities draw focused void through the prism to deal cosmic damage split between your target and nearby enemies. Damage increased by 30% per enemy struck up to 150%. This effect may occur once every 10 seconds and accumulates latent power within the prism up to 15 times. On use, you consume all latent power to gain a bunch of strength per stack for 20 seconds. So kind of void. This is kind of a Spymaster's Web type effect here, where you can proc this thing up. I mean, yeah, up to 15 times every 10 seconds. If this procced exactly every 10 seconds, this would be 2.5 minutes before you got full latent power on this thing. So yeah, definitely similar kind of vibe there to Spymaster's, especially if it doesn't proc exactly every 10 seconds. If it, you take a second extra to proc it, maybe it takes 2 minutes 45 or something to realistically stack all the way up on latent power. And then on use, you get an absolute boatload of strength. Let's do our check here to see. It's also going to give you agi, and it's not going to give you intellect. Okay, so it's agi or strength, but not intellect, is what the Unyielding Nether Prism will do. So it's the exact kind of inverse of Spymaster's, which only did intellect. Yeah, do note that, again, this one does not have any stats on it whatsoever until you press the button on it. Okay, up next is Nexus King Salhadar. This one occupies the same spot in the raid as Mugsy, which didn't really have good loot last tier. I mean, obviously it had some good items, but it was less good loot than the bosses before and after it. And this one, similarly, we're dealing with the same risk here, as there's not tier on this boss. We have some weapons. one of which is the last part of the Shards of the Void here, the Void Glass Sovereign's Blade. So intellect users will have their pick between a staff, a dagger, and a sword, which means that every single intellect user has at least one option, and usually two, that their class will be able to use to fill out their set bonus if they want it. Then we have some off pieces. We have a necklace, a Mastery Crit necklace. And we have a couple of trinkets here. We have the Nexus King's Command, which is a Mastery Trinket, and it has a passive that says, become oathbound to a nearby ally every 30 seconds. Directly healing the ally fulfills the oath to grant you 14,680 intellect for 10 seconds, and shields your ally for 100% of any overhealing done. Wow, okay, this is a fun little mini game that it's going to give you. So every 30 seconds, you're going to have an ally that basically gets marked. And if you heal them, even if they're full health, you're going to get a bunch of intellect for 10 seconds. So this, in theory, could be an intellect mastery stat stick, with the intellect being up for 10 of every 30 seconds, which is certainly a drawback. But the thing is, you can bank this for right before there's big raid damage. And if you heal the person, even if they're already topped, now they get a big absorb shield over them. And then that protects against the first hit of the raid damage. So say you're setting up right before big raid damage comes out, and you're like a holy paladin. You could do a big holy shock into the target or lay on hands even, whatever you wanted, even just a flashlight, something like that, into the target. Give them a little bit of a shield, so that shield is going to be effective healing, that you're able to do the global before anybody's taken any damage. And then for the next 10 seconds, you have the full power of your stat stick here, giving you full intellect. So definitely, this seems like it'll be a pretty fun little mini game there that also will work reasonably well, even if you are just using it without paying too much attention to it. But there's definitely some min-max available on this trinket. The other one is the Perfidious Projector, which is a haste trinket that on use on a 2-minute cooldown, you can compel an Oathbound Shadow Guard squad to annihilate your target and nearby enemies, dealing 7.2 million cosmic damage split between them, increased by 30% per additional enemy, up to 150% on a 2-minute CD. So this is our very standard thing that does big damage trinket that we sometimes see, similar to the Cosmic Wanderer, those sorts of things. It does increase its damage, again, on the same formula that they've been doing with a lot of trinkets this tier, of the 30% per enemy up to 150%. So on 6 targets, you would be dealing like 18 million cosmic damage on one global of pressing this thing. That could be pretty good. Could still be a pretty good global, even in AoE. And single target, of course, also looks reasonably strong for a trinket if you're in the market for putting the power budget of your spec into something like this. This is the kind of thing that would often be like a good outlaw rogue trinket, although the fact that it's got haste as the stat on it instead of something like agi or crit verse even make that a little bit less exciting. But yeah, definitely a trinket worth thinking about. There is also a very rare from this boss, the Maw of the Void. This is a 2-handed strength or agility mace with a little bit of crit on it, but note that this one does pay a cost. You're getting less secondary stat than you normally would on a weapon here, I believe. We can double check this again if we just look at... Yeah, so this one has... Oh, no, okay, this one's got 2,500-ish secondary, and this one's also got 2,500. So you get the same amount, it's just only crit. So actually, you're not paying a price in terms of secondaries on it, which is good, because you're not actually getting a benefit. I've just finished reading the item, and the on-use is Empower the Maw's Singularity, collecting loot from corpses within 40 yards and crushing them into void dust on a 3-second cooldown. So this is just... This is just for memes. Yeah, I don't think there's anything they make anymore where you have to loot items off of enemies in combat. They actually did used to make a few mechanics like that this would be maybe helpful for, but yeah, mostly this is just for farming stuff. Cool looking item as well, but yeah, this is one of those very rares that doesn't actually do anything for power level. Okay, finally we have Dimensius, the All-Devouring. In addition to the Curio that we've come to expect here, and the Unbound Star Eater that we've already taken a look at in one of my previous videos, we have the Supermassive Star Crusher, the Ergospheric Cudgel, then we have a couple of off pieces, and a ring. The ring is a haste crit ring that says the powers of your Reshi Wraps also reduce cosmic damage taken by 50% for 20 seconds, or until a little bit less than 1 million damage has been prevented. Definitely a compelling little bonus here that's going to be a reasonable chunk of extra HPS across your across a fight, for instance. This is the kind of thing that when you look at Race to World First guilds, they're going to have 18 of these or 20 of these things from Heroic across their mains on that first week, because they run splits, and like this is one of those power level increases you can get from those slots. At least it's not a very rare this time around, so it's somewhat attainable for the rest of us to hope to get one of these things kind of early, even if we're not running a bunch of splits. But yeah, this is definitely a powerful effect. That's, I mean, getting you're preventing 3 million extra. You'd be doing like 2.5 million HPS. Well, I guess your Rescue Wraps aren't going to proc. It depends on how often your Rescue Wraps proc. I think they proc, if you have the boots, I think they do proc 3 times a minute. So you would be getting 2.5 million HPS per player that's wearing this if you actually are taking that much cosmic damage, which I assume on a lot of these fights you are. So yeah, this thing seems really, really, really good. It's also a haste crit ring, which sign me up. That's a very good stat combo. We also have the all-devouring nucleus here. This is a versatility trinket that says, taking damage has a high chance to cause you to devour the essence of nearby enemies, dealing shadow damage split between them and healing you for 150% of the damage dealt. And this thing procs at base mythic eye level for 700,000 shadow damage, so you'd be getting more than 1 million healing on yourself here. Fatal damage not exceeding 14.8 million instead restores you to 10% health and reconstitutes you as unstable void for 6 seconds. Exceed 75% health to stabilize and avoid death. This effect may occur once per 8 minutes. The heart is unable to deal damage while recharging. So this is a lot of words. Let me break down exactly what this is going to do. When it's not on cooldown, you get this damage proc when you're taking damage. That's going to do some extra damage and do some extra healing for you. Pretty nice. Potentially quite a large bit of extra DPS and HPS. But when you would die, you instead get put at 10% health, unless the damage is more than 14.8 million, unless the overkill was more than 14.8 million, which it's a lot. If you're getting overkilled by that much, seek help. Something really wrong has happened. But you do then have 6 seconds to get topped, or else you will die still. So this is a cheat death that, it's interesting. There have been several different takes on cheat deaths that they've made. This one has a very potent drawback that says, okay, you're going to have 6 seconds, during which time you need to get back up, not to full health, but to 75% health to stabilize. Now, this is the kind of thing that strikes me as having a very high value on a weak aura that like lets you know that you have 6 seconds until you're going to die if you're not topped, and also ideally one that lets your healers know, hey, we need to top this person within 6 seconds, or else they are going to die. And then this has the further downside of losing all text except for versatility for the next 8 minutes once it does proc. That is a lot of downsides for a cheat death trinket. I suspect this is still going to be... I mean, if you just thought about this, so you could see this as like, oh no, I'm losing all this text on my cheat death trinket if it procs. The other way to think about this is, hey, this is a cheat death trinket that if I don't proc a cheat death, if I don't need the cheat death, it instead does this damage and healing, which is great. There have been a lot of cheat deaths that only have stat and then cheat death effect. This one has stat and then either damage proc or cheat death effect. You'll use the damage proc until you get the cheat death effect, and then both go away. But this seems extremely powerful, actually, to me. I've described some of these things as downsides, but really I'm looking at it now, and I'm thinking of a lot of them as upsides compared to some previous cheat death trinkets. Like you can see the... I guess I'm wearing the Royal Dagger Haft, which is also a very good cheat death trinket on my PTR character here. I like wearing cheat death trinkets for PTR testing. This one has, for instance, it absorbs up to a certain amount of damage from an attack that would kill you, but then you instantly heal, but then you do take all the damage over 10 seconds. But yeah, look at this one. This one's only got secondary stat and then the cheat death effect, right? This one literally it's better than that, right? It's got much more than that. So this seems like an extremely good cheat death trinket. I think this is going to be one of those things where I will be earning this thing on each of my tanks. I will be putting it on, and I will be taking it off sometime in midnight and keeping it in my banks on my characters so that I can take it out on the PTR and test with it for future PTR testing. Up next is the Screams of a Forgotten Sky. This is a critical strike trinket that says your harmful spells and abilities have a chance to strike your target with an abyssal comet. dealing cosmic damage, amplifying their gravity to increase the damage of future comets by 5%. Upon death, enemies implode to deal cosmic damage per gravity stack, split between nearby enemies, and on the same text, increased by 30% per additional enemy, up to 150%. And this doesn't say anything about being capped here, which usually this sort of trinket would be capped, but because it's an end boss trinket, there's no cap on this thing. So if this could stack up like over a 10-minute fight, if Dimensius itself, for instance, is a really long fight, this strikes me as the kind of trinket where like a heroic Dimensius trinket is going to be pivotal to killing mythic Dimensius, because it will just do huge amounts of damage to your enemy over those, say 10 minutes of a fight. Now, in addition to a Cosmic Hearthstone toy, there's no other very rare on this boss. So this entire raid actually only has the one very rare, and then we have the personal loot boots. But it looks like they're moving away from, I think this tier, Liberation of Undermine, had 4 very rares, whereas this one, I guess, instead of doing that, is doing kind of a cosmetic very rare, right? Like, obviously, if you like crit, this is good, but it's just a weapon. It doesn't have any special value beyond its stats. It's just got some trinket text on it. And then some very rare, but not very rare necessarily. I don't know how rare these things are, but some personal bonus loot, potentially boots as well. Very interesting set of items from this tier. Definitely one of the things that very much jumps out to me is the power of the Shards of the Void set bonus looking pretty compelling for our intellect using friends, and the fact that you could potentially get, say, a heroic trinket and then a mythic weapon off of the 3rd boss fairly early in the patch that would combine with this and be a very, very strong thing to equip. Also, definitely just a lot of solid gear and interesting trinkets in the raid. Let's move over to the dungeon, where we will have, not Tazavesh, the Ecodome Aldani loot to take a look at real quick. So up first, we have a 2-handed Agi polearm. This one, I don't think is paying a price in secondaries. Doesn't look like it, because this is the champion track version. And on use, every 2 minutes, you can inflict some spell strike damage split between enemies within 12 yards in front of you. So decent chance this thing's just going to be the best Agi polearm if you're one of those users, because it looks like you just got some free damage on it. Not a huge amount, but every little bit is good. Then some other weapons. I don't think any of these other ones have special text on them. Yeah, just doing a quick check. Yeah, no special effects on anything else. We have a Haste Mastery Ring. Then the trinkets here, we have the Incorporeal Warp Claw. This one is a Strength Trinket, or Agi Trinket. And this says your melee attacks have a chance to coalesce a Warp Stalker Echo to strike with you, dealing arcane damage split between enemies in its path, so a little damage proc trinket. We have the Azikaran Parapodia, which is a haste trinket that says your damaging spells have a chance to attract mites to feast on your target, inflicting shadow damage over 5 seconds. Well-fed mites share their meal with you, giving you intellect for 30 seconds, so an intellect haste. A haste trinket that procs intellect and also does a little bit of damage, I guess. Kind of similar to Sackbrood, I guess, when you look at it that way. Then we have Lily of the Eternal Weave, an Agi intellect trinket that on use, for every 90 seconds, you can get 15 seconds of a medium amount of mastery. So potentially something you might be interested in. As dungeon trinkets, these do tend to be tuned a little bit below the raid trinkets. And just on the math here, this looks true for the mastery amount on this trinket as well. But I could be mistaken about that. That's just some napkin math in my head. Then finally, one other thing I wanted to look at was the set bonus names, because I am always a huge fan of the names that get created for the set bonuses every tier. And there is at least one that I think is an all-timer that I've seen so far in here. So up first, we have the Mage set bonus, which is the Augur's Ephemeral Plumage, featuring the Wide Brim, the Orbs of Power, the Habiliments, the Mitts, and the Trousers. Okay. Then we have the Chains of the Living Weapon. This is actually the Warrior set. The Face Shield, the Ramparts, the Bulwark, the Crushers, and the Leg Guards. All right. We have the Charhound's Vicious Hunt. This is the Demon Hunter set bonus. We have the Vicious Scalp, Horn Guards, Bindings, Fell Claws, and Hide Coat. The Crash of Fallen Storms is the Monk one. We have the Half Mask, the Glyphs, the G, the Grasp, and the leg wraps. G or Gi? Maybe this is Gi. I'm not. I think I've seen this before. I think they used this on the Nerebar Palace monk set as well. Then we have the Eulogy to a Dying Star, which is my front runner for the name of a set bonus, potentially of all time here. This is the priest one. We have the Dying Star's Veil, Pyre Lights, Cassock, Caress, and Leggings. The Hollow Sentinel's Wake is the Death Knight one. We have the Stone Mask, the Perches, the Breastplate, the Gauntlets, and the Stone Kilt. Then we have the Howls of Channeled Fury. We have the Aspect, Fangs, Furs, Claws, and Tassets. We have the Inquisitor's Feast of Madness, which is the Warlock one. So we have the... And I like the way that they've done this. So a lot of times they will either change like the prefix or the suffix of these words, right? Like Channeled Fury, and then all of these are things that go before Channeled Fury. Dying Star, and then all of these are words that go after Dying Star. But the Inquisitor's blank, a Feast of Madness, is all different Inquisitors blank, and then either of or to madness. So we have the Inquisitor's Portal to Madness, the Inquisitor's Gaze of Madness, the Inquisitor's Robe of Madness, Clutches, and also Leggings here. So definitely some, again, just, it's impressive. There's been, 30 plus tiers of raids in the game's history, and there's still innovation happening on the naming front here. Then we have the Midnight Herald's Pledge. This is the Hunter one. We have the Cowl, the Shadow Guards, the Hauberk, the Gloves, and the Petticoat. Oh man, you know that whoever was doing this, I know the guy who does this actually, probably was not thrilled about having to get to Gloves here on Midnight Heralds. I wonder how much time was spent with a thesaurus open trying to come up with something other than gloves, and then dejectedly just saying, yeah, okay, whatever, man, put gloves on, I'm over it. I got 13 of these things to name. Gloves is gonna have to do. Then we have the Ornaments of the Mother Eagle. We have the Sky Mane, the Ritual Pauldrons, the Vest, the Wings, and the Breeches. Interesting that the wings here are... these are gloves. Usually I would think of wings as being shoulders, but these ones, or I guess cloak, but this is wings that are gloves. I guess it makes sense because eagle, an eagle would have its wings kind of be where the hands are. Then we have the Shards of the Void set is showing up here. That's, of course, a different thing than a tier set. We have the Shroud of Sudden Eclipse, the Hood of Sudden Eclipse, Smoke Mantle, Tactical Vest of the Sudden Eclipse. That's gonna be a good name. The Death Grips and the Pants. Oh, Pants. You hate to see it. The Spellweaver's Immaculate Design here. We have the Immaculate Focus, Pauldrons, Crest Ward, Scale Guards, and Rune Slacks. I like runes. I like the idea of mages or evokers don't wear slacks. They wear rune slacks. Then we have the Vows of the Lucent Battalion, which is the Paladin ones. We have the Lightmane, Chargers, Curious, Protectors, and Cuisses. Then we have the Ageless Serpent's Foresight. We have the Ageless Serpent's Mane, Shoulder Pads, Inked Coils. Wait, these are old ones. Yeah, as I was reading these, I was like, hang on a sec. I've heard these before. Yeah, these are the Liberation ones. Okay, so we've gotten through all of the new set bonus ones up here. Yeah, again, Eulogy to a Dying Star. That one has got to be my favorite set bonus name up here. So very cool. Always a big fan of these things. And I think that is it for the content of this video. Hope you've enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.